Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, the blogger, the prince, and the mainstream media. How the internet broke a conspiracy of silence. Russia at the polls, but did the media report the full election story? Britain's BBC, the latest network to try to speak to Arabs in their own language. And has the man behind Super Size Me...
I'm looking for Osama bin Laden. Why is that funny?
...bitten off more than he can chew. Welcome back. 10 weeks into his tour of duty, the news finally hit the headlines that Prince Harry, third in line to the British throne, was fighting on the front line in Afghanistan. The story wasn't broken by the notoriously news-hungry British tabloid press. The papers, along with the rest of the media in the UK, chose not to publish a word until the prince's safe return. The story actually emerged through the American website, The Drudge Report, and that sent the news media into overdrive. That's our starting point this week, the deal between the British Defense Ministry and the media. How did it hold for 10 minutes, let alone 10 weeks? And the question of whether this was a safety issue, a case of well-managed war propaganda, or both. When Prince Harry was deployed to Afghanistan in mid-December, the media were on the story. Cameras were rolling on him before he went. They accompanied him on patrol in the province of Helmand. They even rolled on his downtime. But none of that was reported for 2.5 months. That was the deal Britain's Ministry of Defense, the MOD, made with the news media.
What we asked for was essentially that we would deploy him and that we would give access. So there was never any attempt to cover the story up. We always intended the story to be told. We just wanted a time delay, and that was primarily for reasons of operational security, not so much for Prince Harry himself, but actually the soldiers that he was deployed with.
I don't feel it was a media blackout. It was an embargo, really. You know, we agreed to withhold a certain amount of information until a certain point in time when it would be revealed. So I'm not quite sure how that erodes the trust that the public have in the broadcasters.
Implicit in the deal was the media's recognition of the MOD's stated concern, that if the prince was known to be in Afghanistan, he would become a priority target. One of the oddest aspects of this story is the way it broke, slowly. Prince Harry left the UK for Afghanistan December 14th. He was there for 3.5 weeks before the story first appeared in Australia on the website of a gossipy women's magazine called New Idea. But no one outside of the internet rumor mill followed up on New Idea's story. 7.5 weeks later, on February 28th, it appeared on a website based in Miami, The Drudge Report. Matt Drudge is an influential American news aggregator who made his name in 1998 when he broke the Bill Clinton-Monica Lewinsky scandal. All Drudge did was post a link to the New Idea article, but that effectively ended the embargo and catapulted Britain's secret story into the global mainstream media.
We've been made aware in the past of issues being raised on various websites around the world, but they had tended to be in terms of conjecture. They tended to be sites that didn't gain an awful lot of traction within the news community. This one was obviously different. It's Matt Drudge. You know, it's a very seriously held site, and once it appeared there, then it was quite clear that the American networks were going to start asking questions, and very many people around the world were going to start asking questions.
So the UK media rolled out the story.
Our top story. After 10 weeks on the front line, Prince Harry is being pulled out of Afghanistan.
He was forced to cut it short for his own safety and that of his fellow soldiers after it was leaked on foreign websites.
The prince was all over the airwaves and on all the front pages, described in mostly heroic terms. It was a rare piece of positive spin for what, in Britain, is a mostly unpopular war. However, the news outlets that agreed to the terms of the embargo have been criticized by some journalists within those same organizations.
There would have been another soldier who could have done the job he did. There was no necessity to send him. Everybody has talked about how good it is for him. I would like to know I'd like to look at the proportion of effort that's gone into covering Prince Harry in Afghanistan compared with the proportion of effort of actually covering what's going on there.
The whole thing was a media stunt from beginning to end. It was a stunt mounted mainly by the Ministry of Defense, which got from it absolutely fantastic coverage for the war in Afghanistan, which which not an awful lot is written about in the British press these days. Most of it says that we don't look like winning anytime soon, and also there are growing doubts about the legitimacy of it. But now the Ministry of Defence and the government generally, of course, have got pages and pages of positive coverage.
The British military and the news outlets that worked with them on the Harry story have defended the arrangement.
Every single report that the media does, there is always an issue over timelines as to when it's reported. So the idea that somehow people are wrong not to have reported it absolutely by the minute, well, there are plenty of examples where the media report things a week later or a month later, just according to their timelines.
What we were not prepared to accept was simply to be handed on a plate some material that had been filmed by the MOD themselves. We were absolutely categorical that all the material would be filmed by the broadcasters, the still pictures would be taken by the Press Association on behalf of the newspapers, and the written reports again would be done by PA on behalf of the newspapers. So it was never in doubt that we would simply be fed material that would paint just one side of the picture.
More than 100 senior members of the UK and international media were party to the secret coverage of Prince Harry. They eventually got their story, but at what price?
This is an example of how news is something that is highly manipulated and doesn't necessarily reflect any kind of reality. I mean, this is a purely media event. I mean, nobody can argue that Harry's presence is essential to the war, that the presence of that one individual lieutenant is going to make any difference in the progress of the war. Boosted the morale of some of the troops, but that's about all.
Our Global Village Voices now and their views on the relationship between the British media and the Ministry of Defence.
This was about a prince who wanted to go. He had no military need for him to be there, and the press connived, and one feels, largely because they knew they were going to get great pictures out of it at the end of it. I don't think it sets a precedent, but I think it's a warning to the mainstream media that at some point the internet is going to catch you out. I think that they have to be very careful about treating the public with this kind, I would say, contempt, because eventually the public will lose trust in their mainstream news.
When I saw that there was news on the royal family on the Drudge Report, which is really rare, you don't really get a lot of British news on the Drudge Report, that was sort of shocking. So the whole thing I think is fascinating in the fact that it brings out issues of sort of national interest in safety of a particular individual, global news coverage, and the ability to basically obtain and distribute information to massive numbers of people instantly.
There are all kinds of angles behind every big news story, and we'd like to hear yours. Email us at listeningpost@aljazeera.net, and we'll find a way via webcam, even camera phone, to get you on the air as one of our Global Village Voices. Time now for Listening Post News Bites. The BBC has finally announced a launch date for its much-anticipated, oft-delayed Arab-language television service. As of March 11th, viewers across the Middle East and North Africa will be able to view 12 hours of daily programming from an all-new BBC team. The BBC has tried this before. It launched BBC World Arabic in 1994, but shut it down after encountering many problems, including editorial differences with the Saudi-backed Orbit satellite network, which carried the channel. The new effort is being financed by the British Foreign Office, and the channel's launching just as satellite broadcasters across most of the Arab world, with the exception of those based in Lebanon and Qatar, are facing new curbs on their freedom. A report by Amnesty International has highlighted the targeting of journalists in Somalia. According to the international human rights group, at least 9 journalists have been killed since February 2007. More than 50 have been forced to leave the country. The report was published one day after 3 radio stations were closed down. Shabelle, Radio Horn Afrique, and Simba have been critical of all sides in the violence that Somalia has suffered from going back to 1991.
A postscript now to a story we reported back in January 2007. KSFO, a talk radio station in San Francisco, has fired right-wing radio host Melanie Morgan. Morgan has said some controversial things in the past about politicians, including Barack Obama. A blogger complained, posted some of the offending material on his site, and the story was reported on local TV, but the radio station was not moved. Then the blogger contacted the show's advertisers, pointed out what Morgan had been saying, and the sponsors, including MasterCard and Bank of America, eventually pulled their ads. This past week, Morgan lost her job. The moral of this story, if you want to change the way broadcasters behave, money talks. Target the advertisers. Coming up after the break, the Russian media focusing on one side of the election story.